As the gaming industry grows and advances, it becomes less accessible for non-gamers. Due to the increasing monetization of gaming and the time commitment which games are asking for, games are becoming less accessible to the average player. In this episode, we are going to go over the reasons on why gaming is becoming more inaccessible, as well as some potential solutions on what could be done to make games more accessible to the average person. What would you say your favorite game of all time is?
My favorite game of all time. I feel like my favorite game that I individually, well, it's interesting because I feel like there's both sort of individual games and there's sort of franchises. I think my favorite franchise of games, I think, is probably like just like the Pokemon franchise. Like another game I've been playing since I was a kid. I love the franchise, and I'll get more into sort of my relationship with games and franchises later on. But I would say probably that's my favorite, and I think my favorite individual game within this series would probably be Pokemon Heart Gold, like the perfect combination of I think it's the best of both worlds, like the old school Pokemon game, but also had some cool. It was a larger game, and there's like a lot of different features to it. So probably Heart
So
Gold.
not only is it Gold, but it's the remake of Gold where they probably added even more on top of the original game.
Yeah, and I feel like that was like the sweet spot. I think I was the right age for it too. And a really subtle random thing that I loved about Heart Gold was that your Pokemon, the first Pokemon in your party, actually follows you around on the map. Which for some reason no other game around that time in Pokemon did that before or after. And I feel like it made me have like a more of like an emotional connection to the game, as if it was actually like my little buddy following me. There's something really odd about that. I don't know what it is, but I always remember that as a kid. So
And on the same category, what would be your least favorite game of all time?
my least favorite game. Ooh. I don't know if I have a specific one individual game, but I think my least favorite genre is horror. I don't like being scared. I have a tough time with anything like that. And so which is funny because actually when I do occasionally watch streamers like yourself, I actually often do watch horror games because I like to see other people get scared, but not me. And I get to experience it through them. But I would say either something horror related or even like really complex like puzzle games. I lose attention really quickly. So I would say probably something in those two areas.
Yeah, TikTok's really affecting all of our attention
Oh my
spans
god,
away from the
yeah.
puzzlers,
Oh
huh?
my god, yeah. Well, and it's so funny about video games and TikTok is that even if you see like podcast clips, oftentimes like a TikTok with a podcast clip will have like video game footage under it of this like a racing game or something that's like very just like ADHD stimulating, whatever it is, just to keep people engaged. Because I don't know, it's just
Subway Surfers X podcasts. It's the
yeah,
way to go.
yeah.
It's like free views right there. Spoiler alert for the
Point of the game.
shorts coming
You're
later.
gonna put you got to put Subway servers under this one, yeah. But make sure it's like a TTC version, so it's like very apt for the city that we live in. TTC server.
TTC surfers. If it hasn't been made yet, make it. All the subways are 10 minutes
I was gonna
late.
say, and like halfway through, like there's like someone pulls the passenger assistance alarm. There's like a violent incident. Like it never actually gets to its destination on time. That's like that. That's the whole.
Nice. What is a game that you would like to play, but you haven't yet had the opportunity to do so?
Ooh, I think there's a couple. Like I think that probably so I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and actually one of the biggest games that I play like now, although not like more casually, like every now and then because you can kind of come in and out of it, is actually Star Wars: The Old Republic, like the actual RPG, like the multiplayer RPG game that I play occasionally. But like I've never played like Jedi Survivor, any of those sort of other like the actual like mainline Star Wars games. I feel like I want to get more into those, and also a lot of like story games. Like I feel like I love like I know I played a little bit of like The Last of Us. I like the concept of games like that, and I feel like for someone like me who isn't really skilled like physically with like playing games and like the hand-eye coordination, I like games that are more like story focused. So I think more of those with like a more of a Last of Us or similar kind of genres of games. I think if I had the time, I would probably sit down and play a lot more of those because it's almost like going through a movie yourself rather than just watching it on screen. So I think stuff like that probably.
And the good thing, a lot of these games actually now
Yeah.
have a story game mode where they actually
Yeah.
reduce the difficulty of the combat that's particularly designed for people like you who are like, I want to witness the story of the game, but I don't want to play a difficult game that I'm going to die every 5 minutes every time a combat encounter occurs. which is great because games like God of War Ragnarok, these games all have amazing stories. But given the fact that they might be too difficult for somebody who's not a gamer, especially because a lot of them follow the Dark Souls format, it's quite nice that they've given that option.
Yeah, and there also isn't like this. A lot of modern gaming also has a lot more PvP elements to it, which as a newcomer, like, is just like totally overwhelming in terms of just like I'm not even ready to play myself, let alone to play against other people. So if I can just kind of focus, go on my own pace, and also pick it up, here, pause for a month, pick it up again, go through the story, replay it to go through the story again. I think it's more accessible to someone who isn't really naturally a gamer, just to kind of enjoy the experience that way too.
What would be your most memorable gaming moment?
Ooh, I think it would probably be so. It's interesting. So games for me are as much as I do play them occasionally on my own. I think my favorite moments with gaming are actually probably communal experiences. So like I remember when I was a kid, I went to a cousin's house or like a basically second cousin, and we played Spyro, the old like that little purple dragon Spyro game. And I don't remember anything about like the gameplay other than like jumping off of cliffs and avoiding monsters or whatever. But I remember playing that together. We played that and we played Pokemon Stadium. And I think what made that special was playing with somebody. I'm a big fan of like co-op gameplay experiences with people. To me, games are a social thing. I like things that can allow me to connect with others. So I think doing that with my relative at the time, I think was probably when I think of video games and like me enjoying them the most was probably that. Or even playing the old school Pokemon games, like comparing what Pokemon we had with other people who were playing the game, playing it together. So I think those communal experiences I think were probably what I've enjoyed the most, I think, over my time playing games.
No, and it makes sense. Even in the age of competitive
Mhm.
multiplayer and how every game is so online and so much PvP, it is still, in most games, more fun to play with people and to have that communal experience and do it together than to play on your own. And I remember when Fortnite had some of its worst seasons, to play on your own and to try and level your battle pass was absolutely awful. But playing with friends, even when these games were at their worst, you had a fun group to play with. It was always fun. This is probably why multiplayer is such a huge factor in gaming
For
now.
sure, and I think that again, another thing as sort of an outsider, like I don't need to be as good because I may be a passenger on most of the teams I've been on, but at least I am playing with other people. It's not just me with the spotlight only on me to do what I need to do. It kind of eases the pressure a little bit, and again makes the focus more on I'm doing something with my friends rather than I need to be really good at this game in this moment. So I think it kind of helps me as well. Although I do feel also there is sort of a little. It depends who you're with too, right? Like if you have friends who like are very competitive about games and you are like the worst player, then communal can also be kind of stressful because you don't want to be the worst player dragging down the rest of the team. So I think it depends on the game too. But I do find I've had more enjoyment with that than with just sort of solo games or especially PvP, which is extremely stressful for a not super intense gamer.
Now, this is a topic I think we should come back to later because the idea of being the worst player on the team is actually a very interesting point and why gaming could be so intimidating for an outsider. Because if all of a sudden you're the non gamer and you're playing on a squad with three other gamers and you're the one holding the team back, that's kind of adding pressure on you to actually take more time on your own to improve at the game rather than just saying, I'm playing for fun. Now you're playing it seriously and having to learn.
Yeah.
Imagine playing League of Legends, a 5v5 game, and you have four teammates who all know the game, and you're the one teammate that is the weak link, but the enemy team is able to win because you are the one person who loses in your section of the game.
Yeah, yeah.
That adds such a level of stress that I honestly think that on its own could be a huge detractor to somebody playing a game.
Well, and I know we can go back to this topic another time, but just to quickly, volley it back to you, like as someone who's typically the best player on the team, you've been the best player in every game I've ever seen you play. How do you feel a certain, I don't want to say responsibility, but like let's say you have someone on your team who clearly is a newbie, is not cutting it. Do you feel sort of dragged down by that player, or do you feel an obligation to coach that player, help that player? How do you feel when you have someone like that on your team? Because as someone who is typically the other end and the worst player, I feel pressure, or I feel bad for putting the pressure on you to have to drag me along. So how does it feel from your perspective?
So it's an interesting conversation because I could go back to League of Legends because we used to
Yeah.
be myself and four of my friends playing League, and it wasn't so much of a situation of one person was carrying the team down. I felt like for a long time I was the best player by a long shot. Now, obviously, some of the other people might disagree with that assessment. I would try and tell them or give them feedback or strategies on what to do, but at the end of the day, I also have to remember I'm not playing with my friends to play competitively. I'm playing with my friends to have fun. So the way you kind of would work around this in a game like League of Legends is you play an off role. If I'm going to play with people who are worse, I could just learn a different facet of the game instead. You use that as an opportunity to expand your game knowledge rather than simply seeing it as my team is a crutch.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like that's a good attitude to have, because when a newer player feels, that there's some gatekeeping, like if I'm not immediately good, my friends are going to give me a hard time, then that's something that's going to be a barrier for me to come back and play again and get more immersed into the game. So I think, and I know it's a bit of an extra level of effort for people who are good to kind of help folks who are not as good, but I think it does in the long run help just grow the accessibility of the game, grow just your community of who you play with. So I appreciate it as someone who's not a natural gamer, but I know it's definitely it can be a complex relationship, especially when you're friends outside the context of that game, who it could be kind of awkward if there's conflict or tension during it.
Exactly. At the end of the day, when it comes to your actual friends, you have to remember that it's a game. It's not, somebody flopping the game is not so important relative to your friendship. And the final question is, if you were to give advice to a newcomer into gaming, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think I would say to obviously, and this goes probably with anything in life, but I think expect to be terrible if it's a new thing at first, or at the very least, don't put pressure on yourself to be amazing, right? It's like any skill or hobby. Like if you want to learn to cook, if you want to learn to exercise, if you want to learn to paint, you're going to have a period of time when you're not very good. So I think being okay with that, I think is sort of, I think, with any skill, but particularly with gaming. But I do think that there's also sort of a back end to that I would also put in this recommendation, like a flip side, which is I think that there's sort of two directions where this can go. There are people who I think are bad or start off bad, like I start off not very good at games and sort of become, oh, I don't want to play anymore, I suck at games, and they just kind of stop. Then there are other people who are bad at games and continue to play, but make it sort of like a bit about them, like, oh, I'm so terrible, which I think is fun to a point, but I think it caps out your enjoyment of the games, because you aren't really trying to get better. You're kind of just making a joke of it, which can be fun, I think, maybe once or twice. But I would say that I understand it can be intimidating, but you can still try and get better and still try and listen and learn as well. And there's a third group of people who actually commit and try and get better. And maybe to those people, I would say that's probably, it involves a lot of asking for help, looking up guides if you really want, having friends who maybe are better at the game than you that can help. I would say those are probably the things I would say, but definitely like it's a slow process. And ultimately, I think the biggest thing, and I think this is probably going to be a theme throughout your podcast, throughout your discussions with everyone else, is that games should be fun. If you're having fun, keep going. If you're not having fun, don't keep going. It's okay to drop a game, pick up a different game, take a break from a game, try again later at a different time. Like if ultimately the point is, are you having fun? You do not evaluate how good you are, how bad you are. Just, am I enjoying myself? Yes or no, I think is the ultimate overlying question.
That rings really true, given that this is the first episode of me filming a
True.
podcast. It's if I'm not enjoying the process of filming and creating a podcast, just stop. I just want to go back to it. I definitely think there is a correlation that occurs between skill in a game and enjoyment in a game. If you're getting eliminated immediately versus if you're getting 10 to 15 elimination games every single time you play, you're probably having more fun on the side of skill. But I also am a firm believer that there should be a baseline level of enjoyment you experience with a game before you actually commit to getting good.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to, certain games or certain franchises are very scalable in the sense that you can approach them and you can interact with them in various levels of complexity. So like for example, I think, and I mentioned this before about how like I've played so many Pokemon games throughout my life. I've been playing them since I was a kid. My niece, who is 6 years old, played Pokemon Sword and Shield. Like she can play them. But yet there are adults who can play them. But the thing is, my niece is approaching them as she goes through the story. She picks the cute Pokemon that she likes, and she can progress through the game with the help of like me or let's say her dad or mom. Whereas, if you're a grown man or grown woman that's playing the game, you might do the PvP instead, or you might do like a challenge to limit yourself or to use certain types of Pokemon. Your team construction might be more complex. Basically, you are interacting with the same game or the same material, but the game allows you to approach it at different levels of complexity based on where you are, and you can just enjoy it for what it is. And it's scalable that way. And I think a lot of franchises are the most popular franchises are probably the best at that, hence their accessibility and all that. So I think that's an important part of gaming for sure, and just enjoying it.
Now, I do want to push us a little bit away from the Pokemon topic just because I actually feel there's so much to discuss about Pokemon and who they're targeting with their demographics and who they're making their games for, that I actually think that on its own would be an incredible episode of this podcast.
Totally. Like I think you could probably do a whole podcast series on that, frankly, and just how it's evolved over the years for sure.
One of the things you did mention before is that you were having that gaming is super inaccessible to newer people just because of the competitive nature and all of that. But do you think that the overbloating of games is also making it more difficult? And let me give you a great example of what I mean by overbloating. So one of the most popular games in the world is Roblox. But Roblox is not a game. Roblox is a game development tool in which you could then play the games that are made in Roblox. So for somebody who has never played Roblox before or is not familiar with games, they may have no idea how to even access these games or know which ones are good or which ones are worth playing. Do you think that the overbloating of games is making it harder for new gamers?
I think so. I think for a couple of reasons. I think the first reason is sort of, that there's always that I don't know if you call it whatever you call it, but basically that concept of like that study they did where it's like if I'm in a grocery store and I see, one brand of peanut butter, I am much more satisfied with my purchase than if there's 10 brands of peanut butter and I can't choose one, even though it's all good, right? It's all peanut butter. I think that's kind of the same thing with games where I think it's the overwhelming, when there's too many choices to choose. But I would say another flip side of it is I think games over time, I feel like, and you would know more about this than me, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the amount of time it takes to become good at a game or even to play a game from front to back, I think has increased over time. Where, I think older games, you could in theory play multiple and be decent at multiple because they were self-contained. You bought the game as it was, you played it, you enjoyed it, you could play multiple games at once. Where now games are sort of like an ongoing commitment. Like I'm constantly getting better. I'm constantly getting new items. I'm doing sort of DLC. Getting better at PvP. So to get good at a game takes a lot of commitment and time. So now to juggle multiple of that is crazy. So a lot of people maybe have one game that they're really, really good at. Like, we have a mutual friend who's the Tarkov master. He only plays Tarkov. But that's a lot of people are like that, where they have their game that they love, because to be good at multiple games to that degree takes way more time than I think we can now afford, given how complex and multi-layered these games have become, and how much games now try to get us to return constantly and level up things and do more things rather than just you played it and it's like a standalone product. So I think that is also made it more challenging in itself as well to get into games, to figure out what to play and where to invest your time, because the time commitment has gone so high that way, and monetary as well.
I'm actually very glad you mentioned this. I was actually going to ask you about the idea of live services and battle passes and all these things trying to get you to play. Because I remember 10, 15 years ago, you could be like, okay, we're going to play Halo tonight, and then tomorrow we're going to play Call of Duty. And once you bought the game, you owned it forever and it was good. The lifespan of Halo 3 when it came out was super long, whereas the lifespan of the new Call of Duty games every year is 1 year. But you're not only are you getting billed $80 for the game, but you're also being charged right away. Well, not being charged right away, but you're being asked already to buy things in the store, battle passes, microtransactions, everything, after already paying $70. I'm using $70 to $80 as a dollar figure based on Canadian dollars, by the way, for those who are gonna then comment to me, games aren't $80. They are in
Yeah,
Canada.
I'm in like the UK and like it's this many pounds, or like someone has a very specific country or currency that they use. Yes, we are Canadian, so that's the frame of reference we have. And I totally agree. And I think an example of this would be like the NHL games. I think are a great example of this, where I played NHL every version every year straight from probably 2005 to like 2011, 2012 maybe, and it was just a standalone game at the time. There were PvP elements, but you could just avoid that. Basically, it wasn't as robust as it is now. But now it's sort of become this overwhelming thing where basically there's this sort of interesting conundrum where I think because for game developers the biggest area of monetization probably is these DLC areas, the PvP areas, like going online and playing online. Like I know for NHL there's like the hut, like the ultimate team, where like you pull packs of cards and players, you build your team, you advance your team, you're buying these packs in the store. I think because that's more monetized now, there's less effort in the actual core functions of the game outside of that, because they're harder to monetize. So I think that kind of stagnates. And the other areas that I don't feel as comfortable participating in, or I don't want to spend as much in, are the ones that are getting most of the attention from the developer. And it kind of creates this challenge where the new version of the game doesn't really change much for me because I'm using the same regular features, where the other features I don't want to, that are too much of my time and too much of my money, are kind of continuing to grow and become more and more of the game, which kind of creates a challenge for someone like me who doesn't really want to invest that kind of money in it. Or even younger kids too, who can kind of get roped into that as well. And it can be kind of dangerous for them too, which is a whole other topic in itself.
I do want to go back into the idea you were talking about all these
Yeah.
microtransactions and stuff. And in terms of, you're a big fan of hockey games, which have a set core features that they bring in every game. Do you think that theoretically you would be more willing to play these games if they said, okay, we're going to release the game for free? We're going to just release NHL Live, and it's going to be a game that they just continuously run the service on and update. Think of it like Fortnite for NHL. Fortnite is a game that you don't have to spend any money to play, and their entire monetization model is on microtransactions. So yeah, you may have to do microtransactions for certain things, but you could still play the base features of the game for free. Would that be more appealing than a new game releasing every single year, but the core functionality is the same?
I mean, totally. I think, to be honest with you, I think it can be kind of a ripoff to buy essentially the same game every year, but then you need to be up to date because you need to play because it gets re-released and all the DLC stuff that comes with it. But I think an interesting sort of quirk with sports games compared to something like Fortnite is because sports games are based off of like the real NHL teams or the real NBA teams or what have you. The rosters of these teams actually change year to year. So I think an excuse to buy the new game is, oh, the rosters have now been updated with the players that are on the team this year, or a team has moved to a new city or has a new jersey. I want that stuff, and I want the most current of all of that to play the most authentic version of that. And I think, EA, I'll use EA as an example because they're probably the biggest culprit of this. I think can use it as an excuse to sell a new game every year. But I would love if instead there was, the free version, and then maybe they released the patch every year that here's the new updated rosters, and that's the base you get. You get the basic features and you get the updated players. If you want to do unlock, let's say, alternate jerseys, alternate uniforms for your team, like fancier equipment, or do some of the more like the ultimate team, like the card, like the PvP and stuff and all that, you can pay for that stuff and do sort of like with Fortnite how you can pay for the other cosmetics or other features of the game. But the core in terms of like, can I play myself against like the PC, can I do like the GM mode where I manage a team, the story mode, have my team have the updated rosters, do what I want to do. And if that was free, then I think for sure I would do that. And I also feel like when the base function of a game is free like that, I feel more inclined to spend money on microtransactions because I feel that the game has given me so much. What's a couple dollars here, $10 there? Because like I'm getting my money's worth because I have so much free time that the game has given me for free. I actually feel more inclined to spend when the game is free, like similar to some mobile games that I play, in a totally different franchise we can talk about, just the Yu-Gi-Oh games that I play as well, both Master Duel and Duel Links. But I think because those games are free, I actually am more inclined to use microtransactions for that. But when it's just a paid thing every year, it feels almost disrespectful to say I have to buy the game and then buy more of the game once I already own it. So it definitely becomes sort of annoying that way, definitely.
And especially when it's an annual release, because it's like, okay, you took my money to enter the place, and as soon as I enter the building, you're asking me for more money. It almost reminds me of going to nightclubs. You're paying $10 to $20 of cover charge to get into the nightclub. And then as soon as you get into the nightclub, you have people trying to sell you drinks. And it's kind of the same business model in gaming. Whereas sometimes, I have respect for a model that says, come in for free, enjoy what there's a lot here you can do for free. But, you want to have a more exclusive item. So let's say, you're in a place and everyone is wearing black t-shirts and jeans, the uniform. But if you want to say, I'm going to wear a white t-shirt or a leather jacket to stand out, okay, you could pay for that. And I'm okay. But I just feel that games that charge you so much money up front and then try and bill you immediately for more stuff, it just feels like the game developers are insulting you.
And do you feel is that do you think the general sense of the community, and do people give that feedback? And if so, how do the developers take that feedback? Because to them, it's like, even if people don't like it, if it's making them money, what's their incentive to not do that, right? If it's working and people are still buying these games and loading up on these microtransactions.
Well, this is exactly what the problem is. No matter how many people, how many creators, how many people go to the devs and complain saying, this isn't right, you're already charging us for the game. Why is it that now all of a sudden I have to pay for more? And I actually could think of a great example of a game that basically went and said to these devs, no, your business model is full of shit.
Oh, wow.
So Baldur's Gate 3 released recently, which is a game based on Dungeons and Dragons. So it's a full price game, I believe it's a full price game at $80. They've basically said, no, we are not releasing any DLC. There'll be no microtransactions. This is the game. You pay for the game and you get it. And less games are going that way. But as more games actually release in this methodology, the gamers of the world and the community are like, this is what it should be.
What's interesting, and as you were talking, I was thinking about this. I feel like, and I don't know if you feel this way too, that so this obviously for like console games is the case that people feel this way. But I almost feel like for mobile games, it's almost the reverse. Where like people like, or I guess most mobile games that are popular are free, and then they have the microtransactions. But I remember Nintendo tried to do the reverse, where there's going to be no microtransactions. Here's I think it was a Mario game. It's like $7, whatever it was, or some whatever price it was. But you get the whole game. There's no microtransactions or DLC or anything. And I actually feel like people didn't love that idea, because on mobile, the expectation is that it's going to be free. And I will pay for microtransactions if I want, but I don't want to ever pay for a game at all, even to acquire it in the first place on mobile. So I feel like it's interesting how, based on the platform too, it could also be different. I don't know if you have found that too, but I think that also affects people's mentality.
I don't think your statement is entirely true, because there is a huge increase in free-to-play games. PS5 today, as someone who has never gamed before, and you would have so many options of games of different genres that are free to play, and then you could pay microtransactions. You have a lot of free-to-play options already on consoles, so people don't have to pay up front for games as much anymore. But I also think you have to worry about, with mobile gaming especially, there's a lot of predatory microtransactions. And the most famous example in recent memory is Diablo Immortal. There's a great video by Josh Strife Hayes about how Diablo Immortal was explicitly designed to leech more of your money.
Oh, wow.
It's definitely a great video that I recommend anyone watch if they're interested in the topic of how microtransactions in mobile games are predatory.
How do you feel about so there's different types of microtransactions that you can make. There's some that are obviously purely cosmetic, like Fortnite, where it's like, you want a new outfit, great. You want a new skin, cool. Like, that's not really harming anybody unless they really want that kind of stuff. Then there's another kind that I'm interested in, which is basically just, it helps you sort of expedite your process or your progress in the game, because a lot of games require so much grinding to get to a certain place, or to get a certain item, or to get a certain level or whatever. But the microtransaction doesn't really give you anything new. It sort of just expedites the progress you are making in terms of getting to this item faster, or getting to the levels faster, making it easier, making it faster. How do you feel about those kind of microtransactions?
So what you're talking about is the concept of pay to win.
Basically, yes.
Now, I actually think that pay to win should be broken into two different categories: pay to win in PvE games and pay to win in PvP games. In a PvE game, I don't really agree with the idea of pay to win. I think it takes away from everybody else, in the sense that, like, if you are paying to get something that someone else has to grind 100 hours to do, you have devalued the 100 hours of work somebody has put into their character. Especially in stuff like an MMO, you could just pay for gear, then all of a sudden it's, well, then why should I put the work into creating? But I kind of understand it, because sometimes it is a time commitment. A lot of people don't have the time to play 100 hours a week or 100 hours even a month. So I kind of understand when convenience factors are made so that, hey, you could still enjoy the game. However, pay to win should never exist in a PvP game, because all of a sudden you're going to be like, okay, I'm not good at the game. I'm going to go spend $200 from my job to just make me better at the game. And the truth is that in a lot of cases, skill will still outplay someone who just bought their way through. But it isn't fair. I'm just gonna go back to Escape from Tarkov as an example. Imagine that I could say I'm gonna pay $20 and it's gonna give me the best loadout in the entire game every time. It's obviously going to give me an unfair advantage in any firefight. Now, I could just get outplayed and lose everything, and then there's my $20 gone. It's entirely possible that that could happen, but in a straight up fight at somewhat equal skill, you shouldn't be winning any sort of competitive thing based on who has spent more money. And I know that, again, Diablo Immortal did the same thing. You could buy your way to more power, and then when you went into PvP scenarios, it would just be completely unfair.
Yeah, and I mean, my personal experience with this was like Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, which is it's a fun game. It's if you like Yu-Gi-Oh! And you're interested in the card game, it's really fun. But there's a very practical application of this concept, which is basically, can I spend real money to get these cards, the best cards to make my deck as the best it can be, the fastest, right? Either you grind and get the free currency, the gems, I think they're called, which lets you sort of buy packs, which is sort of like a roulette system. You kind of open the packs from a box like real life and hope for the best. Versus if I spend money, I can buy unlimited packs, get the cards I want, buy special bundles or like battle pass type things like you mentioned, and I can get the exact best cards and build my deck immediately, which kind of gives me an unfair advantage. Now, a point you mentioned earlier was that doesn't necessarily guarantee victory, because I need to know how to play. I still need to know how to play with the deck the way it's intended and use it properly. So I may end up seeing, oh, this deck is the best in the format, the best in the game. I'm going to spend $200, which is often what it costs at least, to build this deck. And then if I find that I'm not good enough at playing this particular deck, I just sunk $200 to try and go up the PvP ladder as fast as possible, and it backfired. And now I'm $200 in the hole because I regret it. Or in the case of card games specifically, they often will release ban lists that now make the best deck invalid. I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously does this. I think other card games do this as well. I think like Hearthstone, I think even, or other games have like a rotation system as well. So the cards, what you buy may not even be valid to even use within a month or few months, which is, so it kind of continuously pressures you to then buy the next big deck, or you become sort of like this chain of just like of drawing your behavior to keep doing the same actions and kind of continuing to invest in this sort of the sunken cost of, I spent this much, what's another $5, what's another $100 even to do the next deck, to continue the level of competitiveness that I expect from this game. So it can kind of be very predatory for sure.
And honestly, just kind of going even into that subject more, is if you spend $200 on virtual Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards versus what happens if I said I'm going to spend $200 and I'm actually going to go out and buy a real deck of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. What happens when your cards get banned? You exchange the cards, you trade them.
Yeah, you still have a product.
There's other workaround. You still have a physical card in your hand that you could then say, I'm going to go trade this for something else, or I'm going to sell this and use the money towards something else. Or even if you after a year say, I don't enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore, you could sell the deck, and instead of maybe it costing you $200 in total, maybe you recoup $75 to $100 and you're only down 75 to 100. It's having an actual physical asset for that kind of money kind of proves better. Now, I know you mentioned Hearthstone. I know Hearthstone has two modes. It's any card is valid or only the rotation. So sometimes there's kind of a protection in play that, oh, you don't have to get rid of it. But I also know in a lot of these games, you know, in my experience with Hearthstone or in Master Duel, you could break down cards you have into a sort of currency to then start working on the cards you want. But, you know, if I spend, it's the same idea. If I spend $200 to get my Eldritch deck ready and all of a sudden they ban Eldritch, maybe I'll be 25% of the way to the new deck after that. And then there's another $100. Well, I got $25 back. I should still spend another 100.
Totally. And there's actually a whole sort of interesting discussion between Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, which is like the mobile game, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and like the features of each and why they have different levels of sort of reception and success and what has made each popular. Where Master Duel has that crafting system you're talking about, that sort of Hearthstone has as well, where, yeah, if I just don't want, either I pulled a card I don't need or the deck I have is no longer valid or I'm just no longer interested in playing it, I can break down those cards, craft them into resources to build new cards or new decks along the way. Where Duel Links, the mobile game, you're just stuck with what you have. So you have cards from when the game was released in 2017 that have been power crept to no end, that like they have no practical purpose. And you can break them down into a currency, but the currency is essentially worthless in Duel Links, the currency that you can break down the cards into. So there really isn't really a practical crafting system. So all you can really do is just buy more product to just compensate and just get more product. You can't really do anything with the old product once it's invalid. And to your point, you're not ending up with a physical product. You're not even ending up with a virtual product that you can convert into something more valuable. So it really is just continuously sinking your money, like almost like paying rent into a mobile game like that, which can just sort of just be it can feel sort of overwhelming and kind of discouraging at a certain point, because you know I spent more money than I care to admit on some of these games, and you know, but if I don't play for 6 months, I come back to Duel Links and everything I spent is now invalid and or is no longer, it's been power cut. It's been, so is it worth continuing to pursue and spend more money? I don't know. Another thing you mentioned too that was I think a really great solution to this is sort of Hearthstone has sort of the open mode where any card is legal. There are, and I know Pokemon has this too in their TCG, and Yu-Gi-Oh has this not in mobile or sorry, not in games, but in paper they have this where they have alternate formats where, like, you know, in this format cards of this pool are legal, and then in this format cards of this pool are legal. So your cards, even if they are not legal in like the current modern format, they're either historical formats that you can still play them, or there are other alternative ways of playing the game that these cards are legal and let you still get value for what you've spent, right? And even, you know, you don't have to just always, I can only play this one format that is the current format. I can do other things with the cards even once they become invalid. So I think letting people just interact with your game in more ways and get more value for their investment, I think, is always good and helps keep people, I think, coming back and engaged and just in the game, as it were.
This actually reminds me of a discussion I had with a different friend of mine about Fortnite. The idea of skins in Fortnite, because my friend, who's also a pretty big gamer, but he's never played Fortnite, he thought that once a season ends, all the skins you get through that season's battle pass or whatever are gone. And I told him, no, anything that I bought or got like from the early battle passes in say 2017, 2018 are still valid. Anything that I have from that long ago, I still have. For example, I bought the battle pass for the first time in chapter 1, season 3. So I still have all of the skins accessible from that battle pass. And what's actually kind of cool about it is because Fortnite blew up quite a bit later, I still have all those things that are no longer attainable by newer players, and it actually adds a certain level of prestige to the fact that, hey, I am an OG, I could show this off. But there's still plenty of things that, for example, I miss. So I don't have the Deadpool skin, for example. So when I go and I see someone play Deadpool, it's like there's kind of a little bit of a FOMO factor involved. And I actually feel like battle passes could cause a FOMO issue or live services. Do you have any thoughts on if that's something that's scaring away non-gamers too?
Yeah, I think so, because I think a lot of games, especially like you know, mobile game or like these live games that we're talking about, they have constant like rolling events, or like here's like for a limited time this item is available either for purchase or just from an event or something that you could acquire it. And I think it creates a pressure to always be playing. you always need to be logging in, you always need to be checking, you always need to be competing and like making time to make sure you are in and get this item or get this thing while it's available. And you can never really just check out of the game. Where, there are other games where, like, for example, back in the day when the games were just one standalone item you would just kind of purchase and everything is included in there. If you took a break for 6 months and you went back and played, you have missed nothing. You can continue, you can just play and enjoy it for what it is. Where now, because there's always sort of new releases or new things that are coming out for limited times, that FOMO, I think, does pressure you to keep kind of coming back and playing regularly, which I think I don't, it can be a monetary predatory from a monetary perspective if it does involve spending money. But even if the items are free, because like I know like with Duel Links and with other games, or even like a Pokemon Go, which I also have played a little bit of, if a new Pokemon's available or whatever, it may not even cost money, but it costs time, which also is sort of an investment in and of itself, where I don't even really feel like playing this game, but if I don't play right now in this 3-day span or this 1 week span or whenever the season might be, even if it's like a 2 month, whatever it might be, I will now never get this item again. And so you now have to force yourself to play a game you don't really feel like playing just to get this item for the prestige of it, or for a completionist sort of aspect of it, where I want to just get everything that's cool that I can get that I want. And I think that creates sort of a pressure as well, that's when games are probably at their least enjoyable, when I feel like I have to play, not that I want to play or I'm doing this because I feel like it. It's because I need to. I'm obligated to keep up or to get something, which I think can also be sort of tiresome, I think, as well, especially for a new player who just wants to kind of enjoy it for what it is.
Honestly, one of the things that I've started doing personally now is I will no longer buy a battle pass in any game unless I have already made it far enough in the battle pass by the time I decide to actually commit to it, to say, okay, I'm enjoying this season of the game enough that it is worth my time. I don't know for you as a non-gamer, but there's been so many times that I bought a battle pass in a game, I played the game for a week, and then I completely forgot about the game, and there's $10 of mine gone, never to be seen again, or that you just don't finish it. And now certain games like Fortnite, if you make it far enough in the battle pass, you've basically recouped your costs. So last season, I didn't finish the battle pass on Fortnite, but I made it far enough that I recouped my cost. But this season just started maybe 2 to 3 days ago from the point of filming, and I haven't bought it yet because I don't know yet if I'm enjoying the game enough, or are the people that I play with enjoying the game enough that I'm going to want to play. It goes back all the way to the beginning of our discussion about playing with friends. I'm more willing to suffer through a game that is not as enjoyable if I am playing with people and making a social experience about it. You mentioned before we have our friend the Tarkov addict. And the reason he loves playing Tarkov so much is because he found a community of players to play Escape from Tarkov with. So just for him, he's more willing to play because he has that community. Whereas if he's on his own, to him, it's like dreadful.
Yeah.
Some real character development
For
there.
sure, yeah. I think a really good example of a fairly well-designed battle pass system actually is Master Duel, where, first of all, it's only, from what I can remember, it's been a couple months since I played, but basically it was only purchasable through in-game currency. So you can't purchase it with real money. And it's actually not a huge amount of currency even to purchase. It's pretty accessible to any player. And to your point, if you were to complete it, you do actually recoup everything that you invest into the battle pass. So it is worth it for that purpose. But I definitely have been the one who I try to only spend if I know, like, let's say I'm already halfway down the reward list. Like, I know if I were to buy it now, it would get me everything. Like, I would be pretty on track to complete it. Then it's worth buying. But if there are definitely times where, like, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play a ton this month. Then I buy the battle pass, and then I maybe play a few games. But then at the end of the month, I'm scrambling out to force games in and force duels in with people on PvP just to climb up the ladder as fast as possible. Because obviously the best item you want, like the cool cosmetic item, is obviously at the very end of the rewards track. So I'm trying to get to that speed run as fast as possible, but which creates a lot of stress in and of itself. But definitely, I think the best way to go about it is if you know you're going to be playing this game anyway, to your point, and you don't have to do anything outside of like your normal enjoyment of the game to progress along the rewards track and make that progress and get the items and go all the way, then yeah, like it's worth it, and you get your items back and it's great. But if it's going to be something that you're going to have to go out of your way to satisfy, I think it can create sort of this like undue pressures if I have like an essay due or have like a work assignment due, and it's like I already have like a job or I'm in school, like I already have enough deadlines as it is, and now my hobbies now also have deadlines that I now need to do work for as well. It can kind of create an undue pressure, especially as a casual gamer like myself and someone who like is an adult with like a full-time job. it's like I got enough deadlines to meet during the day in my 9 to 5, and then to have deadlines and I got to meet outside of that it can be a barrier as well. So it definitely can be like that as well for sure.
No, I would just like to counter your Master Duel example of the Battle Pass, Halo Infinite. And the reason I would like to use that as a counter is what Halo Infinite has done very well is they've said once you buy a Battle Pass, it's yours forever.
Oh
If the
wow,
season ends and you don't complete it, you could go back in and still do it. You've bought it, it's yours to
way
do.
better. Yeah.
So I don't know if you could buy backwards. Like if I miss a season, can I buy the old battle pass? But I know as a fact that I could be like, no, I can't play this month because my work is so busy. I'm getting home every day at 9 o'clock. I don't have time to play. Once I'm done and the next season starts, I could be like, oh, I'm going to put all of my battle pass progression to the old battle pass instead of whatever the current season is and still earn the rewards that you technically paid for.
Yeah, that's way better if it's like a lifetime thing because you know that eventually you will get it. Like if you just work at it, right? It's not the same. It comes without sort of the pressure and the obligation. So that definitely is probably the most wholesome way of going about it. And I also really like, and I haven't seen this in another game, but you mentioned about choosing the season that you want to play because different seasons obviously have different rewards. If you missed the reward you really wanted, now like is it gone forever? Like do I have to do this track that I don't like this much this season? You get to actually just invest. You get to invest your time in what you actually want, which I think it sounds simple, but that's not always what games are willing to give you. So I think I definitely would. I have no pushback to that for sure. That definitely is probably the best example I've heard about a battle pass that is actually not so toxic or not so stressful in that way.
Do you find that gaming communities being toxic is another deterrent, especially given how online gaming is nowadays?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, so much of our gaming, like we've talked about throughout this episode, is about our experiences with other people and playing with friends. Frankly, there's times where even playing with friends can be kind of toxic, as we mentioned at the beginning, where friends are sort of, if they're like really overly competitive or really just difficult to play with or unenjoyable to play with, that's already one area. And that's people you know. And then when we talk about playing online, where you're dealing with strangers who don't even know you at all, it's even worse potentially at times. I remember, a great example of this is playing online with NHL games. There will be team names that are just like blatantly like racial slurs or like offensive statements or or you or even if they're not, let's say it's a regular team name, you get past even that, let's say, and you're playing the game. For some reason, there are people who just their goal is to just ruin the experience for you. So whether it's like they're purposefully playing in a way that is they're not actually trying to play the game, they're just trying to be obnoxious and like do stupid things in the game or not actually play and make an enjoyable experience. There's even been times this hasn't happened to me, but it actually happened to a friend of mine where they log into a game and the other team is just like making as much noise as possible. Like they turn on their mics, they're just like screaming, playing music, like making huge, like obnoxious sounds. And I don't even know if they were actually trying to play the game or not, or just to be obnoxious, but they were just like making horrible sounds and just like ruining the experience for everyone. You just have to basically back out of the game and play again and just hope for the best. So I think it's a lot of difficulty because there's really no moderation for any of this. Like, who do you report this to? If like, oh wow, like I'm a person of color logging into the lobby and the team I'm queued up to play against has like a racial slur. What is your recourse for that? Who do you contact the developers of the game? Like, what are they going to do about it? So it's a kind of like a wild west. And I think people, and I mean we've known this about online and digital stuff for I think as long as we've had the internet, is that when people are anonymous, they can become animals. Like things that people are willing to do and say, and I think that can be intimidating and like very like it just feels very unpleasant, right? Like it can be hard enough playing with people especially if you're new and other people are better. But then when you also are not, you're kind of learning the game, you're trying to get better at the game, and then on top of that, people themselves can be very toxic that way. And it's not everybody, of course. This is a small percentage. It's always the minority, but that is also very, very overwhelming and difficult as well, and is definitely a barrier, especially when we talk about PvP, when sometimes if you want to quit a game because you're having a terrible experience with the other person, it could actually dock you points on like a progression ladder, or you can lose the rank you're at in PvP. Like there's actual consequences to surrendering or backing out of the game. So you're kind of forced almost at gunpoint to kind of finish the game, deal with this horrible opponent that you're dealing with, which you don't really have any recourse even within the game to even back out of it. So it can definitely be unpleasant as well. I know I've definitely, even when I was playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, and there are sort of these co-op things you can do called flashpoints, where you kind of go into other like three other players and you kind of go through a mission. And I screwed something up at once. I was not very good at this particular flashpoint. I never played it before, and this other player in my group starts like roasting me, and it's like, dude, I don't even know who you are, and it's like this could be some 13-year-old. I could be frankly a kid who you're insulting, or this other person could be a kid. I don't know, but that is something that like I don't want to play again now. If like I tried for the first time, I wasn't very good, and immediately I'm getting roasted by someone who I'm trying to play cooperatively with. So it could even happen when you're playing with team members if they're strangers too. So I think when other people are not welcoming, it is a form of gatekeeping as well. That like if people are not going to create like sort of a pleasant environment, I'm not going to want to come back. I have other things I could do with my time. So I think it definitely can create a bit of a challenge from that as well, for sure.
I'd also like to point out that I also have noticed that there are certain games
Hmm.
in particular that have reputations for being incredibly toxic, especially towards new players. And I would say the games that have the biggest reputations for that also coincide with the games that have the biggest learning curve. So the game that I think of that is the most toxic is League of Legends. I've also heard Valorant is quite toxic, but when I filmed my video of I have 7 days to learn Valorant from being a completely new player to where my skill ended up 7 days later, I think I maybe ran into one toxic person, and to be honest, I just muted them.
Yeah,
A lot of the times you can use in-game
yeah,
functions to mute players, and it's actually, I've always heard, like when learning League of Legends more, what was the first thing they said? Mute your teammates. If you're in a low rank, the odds are no matter what your teammate thinks, it doesn't
yeah.
necessarily mean they're right. So just ignore
Hmm.
them. And by just muting everybody to begin with, you avoid some of the toxicity. But there are games that I think do this very well. In Hearthstone, I actually have no
Yeah.
direct method of communicating against my opponent. Unless obviously, like if you and I were playing against each other, you and I could be chatting on Discord. And then obviously, if I take a couple of comments to roast you, it's a situation of two friends roasting each other. It's completely okay. But there's no way in game for me to communicate other than a couple of voice commands that the game prompts you with using the character voices. And I think there's even a cooldown, so I can't just spam somebody to
Yeah.
be annoying.
Yeah, and Duel Links, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links has also those like you can only send like pre-set messages basically, like you just said. There isn't a cooldown though, so people do occasionally spam them. Occasionally, it doesn't happen a lot. But another thing is also that in Duel Links, in Duel Links and Master Duel, every online Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, there's a timer for your turn because people will often they'll slow play, they'll be obnoxious that way too to frustrate you. But you can only do that so much because there's a timer on your turn.
But not only that, I know with Hearthstone, on the same topic of the timer, in Hearthstone, when the timer goes down once, you actually get less time on
Yeah,
your next turn. It's kind of a preventative
exactly.
measure saying that, oh, you're going to make us sit and wait. Well, we're going to reduce your timer so you can't do that more than once.
Exactly. I am curious though because so this that format clearly works really well for card games because it's you against an opponent. You can you don't really need to communicate a lot. But let's say you are in these other games that where there is like this co-op play with teammates. Do you feel that would be a solution even for that too? Because I feel like the live communication is part of like good in theory good teamwork, communicating with people like that. You to take out that function and replace it with like standard phrases. I don't know if that would really work the same way outside of the context of a card game. How would that work there?
I think it only goes so far. Like Apex Legends was the first battle royale game to really introduce like good pinging, so you could communicate with your team basically in full by using the ping functionality. And a lot of games have actually kind of stolen this idea from them, but it only goes so far. If I ping somewhere and then I see he moves, do I have to keep hitting the ping button, or do I turn on my microphone and say the guy's moving left from where I pinged, so you could kind of track, or he's hidden behind the tree with a V shape? There's a certain level of call outs, but I kind of have formed my own policy on how I deal with this stuff. And it actually drives certain friends of mine a little crazy. It is, I do not play with random. Unless it's someone I know or somebody I know knows, I will not play with them. Like, I'll give you an example. If I'm playing Fortnite myself, I will not queue duos, trios, or squad and fill it with randoms. I will only play solos if I'm on my own, or if we're three and squads are four and there's no trios, I'll say, okay, we're queuing up as the three of us. We're not accepting a randoms. and we'll be at a disadvantage, but I don't want to get like a toxic kid yelling profanity in my ear for the whole
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. And I think that works well if you have that community. I think this kind of goes back to our point of like games, I think, are better with that sense of community because a lot of people, if you are a newcomer to games, perhaps you don't have any friends who play games in general, or at the very least, the game you want to play. And you don't have that option to actually queue with people you know. You have no choice, but you don't have the luxury of having people to play with. So, with that said, like, do you think that there's value, I guess, maybe in trying to find online communities to meet people at Discord? Like, what would you say? Are there ways to, let's say you want to have the sort of the communal experience that we kind of have been talking about throughout this, but you don't know anyone right now? What do you think are the best ways to connect with other people to form these healthy communities to play with, to help, especially a newcomer, to help them feel more comfortable? Because I have not tried this or found this myself. Because I mean, I happen to have you and others who already play games, but for someone who doesn't, who's a newcomer, what would you recommend?
This is going to be an unusual methodology that I would recommend, but what I would actually say is go find a live streamer who plays the game and get involved in their community. So I know, for example, before my friend found his Escape from Tarkov community, I think this might have been before that friend even started playing, another friend of mine wanted to find people to get better at the game with, and he ended up joining the Discord of a streamer named Darkness429, who was a Facebook partner. What he did is he actually found a group of people to play the game with who could help teach him and help him get better at the game through that. So the reason why I say a streamers community, depending on the game, is because you know that there's a good chunk of people probably there for the same thing as you. And a good way to look for streamers in that type of category might be look for streamers who make YouTube videos particularly informative. So I'm going back to the Escape from Tarkov example. If I went into looking for Escape from Tarkov tutorials to do better, I might find creator Jesse Kazam. And I say, okay, he has a Discord that he says a big part of it is to find community members to play the game with. So I say, okay, I want to find people to play the game with. I'm going to join this Discord server and I'm going to try and get involved in this community. But the other thing you always have to remember when getting involved in a community is that it is give and take. You can't just take from the community and ask for help and ask for help and ask for help. You need to provide value back too. Otherwise, people are going to see you as a parasite and no one's going to want to be involved. Reputation matters, but since you're starting at zero, you could build it. You should always follow the methodology when you're trying to build like new networks in terms of gaming too, is give as much as you take. Now, obviously, if you're a new player, you may not be able to give yet, but don't beg for help either.
Do you also think that there's ways to give that aren't necessarily knowledge, but are just like being a good vibes and just like a good member of the community, like just being pleasant?
Well, yeah, I definitely think that helps. Just being a pleasant community member and someone that people want to associate with is value in and of itself.
Definitely, I have been on a few of your stream chats and all that, and it's always a lot of fun too. So definitely always worth checking out.
So, just my final question for you. If you were going to get more involved in gaming, if you wanted to, what would you look into doing or what would you more try to avoid?
Yeah, I think for me, I think what I would want to do more of is probably I think there's two main types of games that I think would help get me more into it. I think I would probably start moving away maybe from the sort of competitive or like the sort of DLC heavy games that I've kind of have been playing. And I think if I were to get more serious into it, I think I would probably look to get more into co-op gaming, maybe reach out to again more community people in the community via Discord or via even friends that I have like yourself or other of our mutual friends to play sort of more of the co-op games that we have. That I know you guys already play, that to get more into that I stuff, because doing them again to facilitate more of the social experiences of it. And I think the other thing is probably to get more into the story games, because I think that gives me a lot more of what I think I've kind of been talking about in terms of it's a standalone product. It's a story, you can kind of go at your own pace, you can kind of experience it for what it is. I think those would probably be what I would do, is probably look for more connections and more community, and also I think try different types of games that maybe would be at my own pace and would kind of give me a different kind of experience. What I probably would not do is start dumping money into games to immediately become very good, or to try and become very good through money. I think that's a very dangerous path to go down. That if you start a new game, to try not to try to skip or try to take the easy route, because money can only get you so far, right? We talked about this earlier, where basically you can buy the best deck, the best items, but if you haven't done the practice, you probably still won't be very good compared to if you just earned it along the way. And also, you may not even have that much fun because you haven't built the community around the game. You haven't really put in the time to earn what you have. You haven't really experienced it. It's not going to be as fulfilling either. And then you just will kind of be going from game to game, spending money to immediately be good. I don't think that's a very fulfilling way to engage with various games. So I would say probably going about it through relationships with people, and probably through games that you can kind of go at your own pace and grow with them, as opposed to just trying to, I need to immediately be the best player at every game I play.